Uganda's opposition leaders and rights defenders raised concerns over the government's decision to close the United Nations Human Rights Office in the country. The United States pledges more than $85 million in life-saving humanitarian assistance to Turkey and Syria after the massive earthquake in the region that has killed thousands of people. And U.S. fighter jets shoot down 2 more objects flying over the United States and Canadian territories over the weekend. We'll have a report. These and more on today's Africa 54.
We begin our broadcast in Uganda, where activists and opposition in the country are crying foul at the government's decision to close the United Nations Human Rights Office in the country. Halima Thumani reports from Kampala.
The Kampala office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights was established in 2006 to focus on the human rights situation in conflict-affected areas in North and Eastern Uganda, but was later expanded to the rest of the country. On February 9th, the mandate of the UN Human Rights Office effectively ended 3 years after Uganda last renewed it. A government letter dated February 3rd said Uganda is not renewing the mandate because there is prevailing peace, the country has strong human rights institutions and a civil society that can monitor, promote and protect human rights. But human rights groups are protesting the decision.
For the last couple of years, we are aware that Uganda's civil society has been weakening. The civic space has been shrinking. And increasingly, we are also aware that the Uganda Human Rights Commission's capacity has also grown less and less. Now it is the time to rebuild that.
In February 2021, after Uganda's general elections, Bobi Wine, the leader of the opposition National Unity Party platform, delivered a petition to the UN Human Rights Office in Kampala. The petition was to protest human rights abuses and abductions of his supporters in the run-up to and after that year's presidential election won by longtime President Yoweri Museveni. Journalists covering the petition were beaten up in front of the office. Speaking to VOA, Wine says the abductions continue. He says the party does not have any trust in the National Human Rights Commission office to deliver justice to victims and their families.
I'm not surprised, and I don't think any Ugandan should be surprised. That is General Museveni's modus operandi. Whenever he's called to account in regards to human rights violations, he will react in a rather ominous way.
Reacting to the closure, the U.S. ambassador to Uganda said citizens must ensure human rights are respected.
There are many, many ways to protect those rights. They can be enshrined in law, but we have to uphold the law, and we have to hold security forces and elected officials and those in executive positions. They have to be accountable when individuals' rights are violated.
The Ugandan government says despite the closure of the Kampala office, it will continue its cooperation with UN human rights officials through their headquarters or their permanent mission in Geneva. Halima Othmani for VOA News, Kampala, Uganda.
The oil industry can significantly influence Uganda's economic growth and development. With vast reserves of oil, the country has the potential to become an essential oil-producing nation. For more insight, VOA's Paul Ndiho spoke to Frank Tumusime, an environmental analyst and founder of Advocates for Natural Resources and Development based in Kampala.
Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, and I greet all listeners.
Uganda is gearing up to export oil, but Uganda is going to be the new baby on the block. Let's start there.
The environment and everything is now ripe for Uganda to leap into production. The estimates are that by 2025, there will be oil production. We had the first rig come in from the Chinese National Oil Company to set up their Kingfisher Dormant area. And that means when a rig comes in, it means drilling is actually going to happen. I can with confidence say that Uganda is on the right track for production and, of course, taking up the necessary benefits associated with oil production.
You say that Uganda is ripe for production, but there are a lot of concerns. There are people who say that, yes, on paper, Uganda might be ripe for production, but there is still a lot to be done in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the environmental impact it's going to have on the ground, the people who have been displaced.
For every investment, you have to balance the scales. And the scale of the pendulum here is swinging between production and conservation. Yes, there are so many factors to consider, all that come, and risks, valid risks that come and are associated with oil production. The environment, climate change, human rights risks associated with exploration and production, quite a number. So it is hoped that these concerns and developers will follow the industry practices, the monitoring agencies. I'm talking about the National Environment Authority, an equivalent of EPA, APA in America, then plus the UWA, Uganda Wildlife Authority. I hope they're able to match up their inspection, monitoring of the environmental phenomenon.
There are people who say that this is perhaps the best thing that has happened to Uganda, but there are others who look at it and say, wow, this is going to be another Nigeria, another South Sudan. Are Ugandans, really ordinary Ugandans, going to benefit from this?
Let me start with the transparency and accountability. Because you see, you can generate the money, but if there's no transparency of systems, readiness of institutions to utilize the money, to control, we already are grappling with endemic corruption. My position is that institutions here are not independent to curb corruption.
The issue of accountability. Yes, there are a lot of people who have suggested that Uganda has already borrowed against the oil. Technically, Uganda is already in debt even before production.
In oil is what we call mortgaging the future. You might mortgage the future without necessarily selling the oil asset, but already by borrowing. And there's so much interest that is being paid now. So definitely once the money comes in, it will be used to pay for these loans. And unfortunately also the temptation to think that we now have more money so we can borrow. So it goes back to planning and our ability to know that this money is actually little.
On that note, thank you so much for your time.
It's always a pleasure talking, Paul.
That was Frank Tumusime, an environmental analyst and founder of Advocates for Natural Resources and Development based in Kampala, Uganda, speaking to VOA's Paul Ndiho. Cameroon is celebrating President Paul Biya's 90th birthday on Monday. The country is also marking its 57th National Youth Day, a national holiday meant to highlight the significance of youth development in the country. Biya is now the world's oldest leader. For some Cameroonians, however, it is not a time to celebrate as their support for Biya has evaporated over the years. Economic progress stalled, dissenting voices have been silenced, and the oil-producing country of 27 million people became split by a separatist uprising that has killed thousands. Boko Haram has consistently launched attacks in the north.
We live in a violent, brutal dictatorship, and again, over the 40 years, it has gotten more and more violent and brutal. As we speak to each other today, we are in a moment where we always live with fear as Cameroonians. Fear is permanent.
The more you add up the age, the wiser you become. The more experienced you become. The more tolerant you become. The more logical even you become. That is why if you notice all constitutions, I'm sure you've seen it, and all laws. Have you ever seen a maximum age.
Upon arriving at the spot, they took out rods and stones which they used to torture me. I am convinced that as they left, since they took everything, even my ID card, today I still have no ID card, and left me naked. They knew I'll be dead by morning. They made me to consume mud. But fortunately, as the saying goes, there is always a God for the poor and the weak. That God was there for me on that day.
Popular journalist and whistleblower Paul Chota is one of several reporters who have been beaten or killed, prompting condemnation from the United Nations. A government spokesperson has yet to respond to calls requesting comment. A commission investigating sexual abuse of children by Catholic priests released its final report Monday, revealing that over 4,800 children were sexually abused by members of the Portuguese Catholic Church, mostly priests, over the past 70 years. Most of the perpetrators, estimated to be 77%, were priests, and most of the victims were men. The Portuguese Commission started its work more than a year ago in January 2022, after a report in France revealed around 3,000 priests and religious officials sexually abused over 200,000 children. The head of the commission, child psychiatrist Pedro Strecht, says the victims were abused in Catholic schools, priests' homes, confessionals, and other locations.
These testimonies, as we will explain ahead carefully, allow us to reach a much more extensive victim network, calculated at a minimum number, absolute minimum, of 4,815 victims.
A maior percentagem das vítimas.
The majority of victims percentage-wise leave the church as an institution and stop practicing the religion after the abuse, and this is passed on to the next generations.
De forma transgeracional.
The commission, which says it is independent, was financed by the Catholic Church. Asked by Reuters in December 2021 if that could be a threat to the commission's independence, Strecht said he would be the first to walk out and denounce if the church intervened in the process. Rescuers in southern Turkey pulled a 40-year-old woman from the rubble of a building Monday, more than a week after a series of powerful earthquakes struck the region. Authorities say the quick death is now nearly 34,000 in Turkey and Syria. The United States has pledged more than $85 million in life-saving humanitarian assistance to Turkey and Syria. VOA's senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
This VOA drone footage captures the scale and magnitude of the destruction of Monday's earthquake in Turkey and Syria. Relief efforts still include search and rescue operations. VOA captured video as rescue workers saved this 11-year-old boy and 3 other people on Tuesday in the Turkish city of Hatay near the Syrian border. The United States is ramping up its relief efforts. The U.S. Agency for International Development pledged more than $85 million in assistance after Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with his Turkish counterpart to ascertain their needs.
I will leave it to the foreign minister and to our Turkish allies to speak to their needs, but the foreign minister did offer to Secretary Blinken some specifics. We will do everything we possibly can to fulfill the needs that the Turks have put forward.
Price confirmed that teams on the ground remain in an acute phase of search and rescue operations. The U.S. has dispatched 2 highly trained urban search and rescue teams, as John Kirby, National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, explained Friday at the White House.
These teams have nearly 200 personnel combined between them, specialized equipment and canine support dogs as well. They've been able to expand their operational reach with the support of U.S. military Black Hawk helicopters.
Kirby confirmed that the Pentagon is moving an aircraft carrier already deployed in the Mediterranean Sea closer to Turkey to respond as Ankara sees fit.
We're working in lockstep with our Turkish counterparts here to make sure that what we're providing is what they need at the scale and the speed that they need, and not trying to overwhelm their system with unneeded material or unneeded capabilities.
On Friday, a United Nations aid convoy crossed into Syria's rebel-held northwest from Turkey, the second UN relief delivery to the war-torn country. The United States has called on the Syrian government to allow humanitarians access to all survivors and is pushing for more safe passages for UN humanitarian aid across the Turkish border into Syria. Russia and China have said the crossing points are a violation of Syria's sovereignty. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Monday is World Radio Day. It is being celebrated worldwide under the theme of Radio and Peace, highlighting independent radio as a support platform for conflict prevention and peace building. Audrey Azoulay, Director General of UNESCO, says, quote, since it was developed about a century ago, radio has proven to be an exceptional means of communication, debate, and exchange. Indeed, it is one of the most accessible and widespread types of media. Azoulay added that the accessibility of radio is the reason UNESCO uses the medium to reach people in sub-Saharan Africa. UNESCO established World Radio Day in 2011. We'd like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, U.S. fighter jets shoot down 2 more objects flying over the United States and Canada. We'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
In other news, the Financial Times is reporting on Monday that Zambia's finance minister is rejecting a call from China for the World Bank and other multilateral lenders to join a restructuring of the country's debt and warned that delays are holding up the economy. A high court ordered the seizure of 2 homes and a super yacht in Cape Town belonging to Equatorial Guinea Vice President Teodoro Nguema Obiang Mang after a local businessman, Daniel Janse van Resenberg, sued for unlawful arrest and torture. And several award-winning musicians are taking to social media to mourn the passing of Kiernan Forbes, a South African multi-award-winning hip-hop artist who was killed on Friday. Popularly known by his rap name, a.k.a. the 35-year-old artist was shot in Durban. U.S. fighter jets shot down 2 more objects flying over the United States and Canadian territories over the weekend. Although a comprehensive analysis of the debris is needed, top Democratic senator says they are now believed to be balloons similar to a Chinese one downed a week ago. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias reports.
After the United States and Canadian leaders gave the green light, U.S. F-22 fighter jets shot down 2 more aerial objects cruising over North America. After being briefed by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer said on ABC's This Week they are now believed to be balloons, but not as big as the Chinese spy balloon downed the previous week.
But much smaller than the first one. Both of those, one over Canada, one over Alaska, were at 40,000 feet. Immediately, it was determined that that's a danger to commercial aircraft.
To learn more about the capabilities of the 3 crafts, a comprehensive analysis of the debris will need to be carried out. there are still too many unanswered questions, Democratic Representative Jim Himes emphasized when interviewed by NBC.
I have real concerns about why the administration is not being more forthcoming with everything that it knows. But part of the problem here is that both of the second and the third objects were shot down in very remote areas. So my guess is that there's just not a lot of information out there yet to share.
Considering the circumstances, the U.S. defense systems should be boosted, Republican Representative Mike Turner told CNN.
We don't really have adequate radar systems. We certainly don't have an integrated missile defense system. We're going to have to begin to look at the United States airspace as one that we need to defend.
Republican Representative James Comer told ABC he is glad the Biden administration is taking the matter seriously, but that there are bigger problems to tackle with China.
Their military continues to grow and expand. They're continuing their Belt and Road Initiative all over the world, where they're trying to create a dominant world economy.
Comer was referring to China's controversial investments in infrastructure projects in several countries. Pentagon officials say the object shot down over Alaska fell onto frozen waters. They expect it to be recovered faster than the larger balloon downed over the Atlantic Ocean. Canadian forces are recovering the object shot down over the Yukon Territory. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
February is Black History Month in the United States, a month that recognizes the achievements of African Americans. This year's theme is Black Resistance. For more on how this month is being commemorated, I'm joined by VOA's Ignatius Ano, who is standing by live at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial here in Washington. Hello, Ignatius.
Hi, Esther. How are you?
Good. I'm sure you've spoken to a number of African Americans right there. How are they marking the Black History Month?
Well, Esther, it's been not only reflection, but it's been mixed reactions from African Americans in particular that have been thrown in this particular location since I've been here over 2 hours or more. They have been talking about the fact that what is essential for the country to do is to bring particularly African Americans together. Unity for them is key as far as the conversation around racial and economic equity in the United States is concerned. For others, the country has come far. There have been gains that have been made, including the very first Black woman serving as vice president, Kamala Harris, as of this time. They've also cited Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is also the very first African-American Black woman to serve, on the Supreme Court, as some gains that have been made. On the other side, they think that gains made have gone back, including police brutality on particularly Black men in this country, Esther.
And Ignatius, how are they interpreting the Black Resistance theme for this year, and how are they using it?
They believe that it's actually a crucial theme for this year. It's very vital, coming off of the back of George Floyd's death 2 years ago. And still the conversation that is happening around police reform and why it is essential for not only African Americans to get the conversation going, but also bring in others who are non-Black people to ensure that they are all doing their bit, contributing their bit, not only having the conversation, but standing in, standing out, and calling out what they see to be systemic racism in the United States. It's a privilege for me to speak to Deborah Jackson. She's coming all the way from Maryland, and she is an assistant nursing assistant. Join me, please, Deborah. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa 54. So my question to you is, what are you proud of or not proud of as an African American in the U.S. today?
I'm proud of African Americans today, the way we're continuing our education, not only for a 4-year degree, but going to get masters and doctorates, and their education, and uplifting their job status so that they can make more money, top level dollars. That's what I'm proud of. What I'm not proud of is the police brutality and the way they set us up to live in hood homes or in the poor locations. And it's sort of a way they try to keep us down generation after generation.
So what do you want to see moving on? It's Black History Month today, and we're seeing people come here to really commemorate the day. What do you want to see moving on?
I want to see more and more Black people. As you can look around the park, there's a lot of white people that are here to see our Black people, Martin Luther King statue. I wish I could see a little bit more of color here. We have to understand our history to move on with it too, and understand how we got here and why he is important. So with them learning more about us, I think that's the way they're holding us down, for they don't want us to know what really went on or how we got here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So, Esther, that's Deborah Jackson there for you. And some of the sentiments that she said also runs through some of the sentiments that I've heard from African Americans that I've spoken to since I've been here. Seeing African Americans at the far front of issues that matter to the country is also seeing them take up leadership position at the very top as they, demonstrate their power and majority in the country, Esther.
Ignatius, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us live. And goodbye, viewers. We're done here with Africa 54. Join us tomorrow.
The Freedom Online Coalition is the only international group of countries specifically dedicated to supporting and advancing respect for human rights online and in digital contexts. Its purpose is to protect the promise of an internet as an open, interoperable, secure, and reliable global network of networks, and to ensure that the same human rights that people have offline are protected online.
As the United States assumes the chair of this group for the first time since its creation in 2011, we're focused on making the coalition even more effective in advancing the promise of the internet and mitigating its perils. We'll stay focused on the coalition's core mission of protecting fundamental freedoms. We will stand up to and build resilience against the misuse of digital technologies and digital repression. We'll work to shape the norms and rules around emerging technologies and enforce those that already exist. We'll continue to strengthen digital inclusion and promote safe online spaces. We'll act with urgency and purpose, because if we don't shape the future of the internet in a way that aligns with our values, autocratic countries will.